morning, singers. It's Laura. Welcome back to the weekly warm-up, where I love to share clear, fun voice education to help you improve your singing and enjoy it more. Let's talk about voice cracks. Now, there are the epic voice cracks that you might hear with your local 13-year-old, those big kind of shifts, rapid shifts, maybe flips from one vocal register into another. These can happen at times of hormonal change when the registers of the voice, and by that I mean the kind of zones like head voice, chest voice, they can be moving around, and so there can be those big, dramatic, kind of catastrophic sounding cracks. They also can happen when we try to push up too high in one register. So let's say I was trying to belt a note that was too high and then I flipped over. This is also actually the flipping phenomenon that yodelers do intentionally. So that is a true crack. And first of all, let me say, if that happens to you, it really is no big deal. It sounds like a big event. It's just a very natural thing. What I want to talk about today, though, more is something that students sometimes come to me hoping to fix that they will call cracking, but I would describe it more as like crackling. I'll try and demonstrate it, which will give you a better idea of what I'm talking about. So something like, you hear those little bald spots in the sound, and they're often accompanied by a sound either like kind of a fry, or sometimes like a squeezing, squeaky door kind of sound. Those don't feel great to make. And even if you are not experiencing momentary discomfort while that is happening to you, because it's so fast, that kind of throat closure can have a real impact on both the smoothness of the sound, but also especially on your vocal fatigue. So today I want to talk about the 3 situations in which it is likely to occur. And then for each of those, to give you a way to maybe start exploring some solutions so that this cannot be a habit anymore. Because unlike those epic register shifting voice cracks, this kind of crackling or squeezing is actually just coming from squeezing or closure in the throat, and is a habit that you can completely get rid of without any kind of alteration to the sound, and you will have much smoother sound and a lot better vocal stamina if you can stop squeezing in the throat. So let's get into it. The first situation in which I hear this happening frequently is at onset. A lot of singers, if they have not mastered balancing the support to actually start an onset cleanly, will end up with like a little squeak at the start of the sound, or sometimes a little crackle. Something like, ah, or ah, like a squeak, a crackle. And what is happening there is that because you are trying to hold the throat closed and then releasing it so that that is a way to control when the onset happens, unfortunately, we end up creating exactly what we're trying to prevent with that tightness. We do it because we're hoping that it will give us a clean onset, and in fact, it unfortunately gives us that little skid mark at the start of the sound. So let's talk about how to fix it or remedy it. I want you to think about an idea that is actually anatomically false. So first, let's get into what is the actual anatomical truth of onset, which is that your vocal cords, they're inside the larynx, and they're actually in this orientation in your body. But just to show you, when your brain sends the message to your vocal cords, like, okay, Judy, it's time to sing, they come very close together. And then between them, there is like a phenomenon of airflow where low pressure goes between them, as they're here and there's air coming up. They get low pressure between them, which draws them together, and then air builds up underneath them and they blast apart, and then they are drawn back together, apart, together, apart, together, apart. It's actually the same principle of physics, the Bernoulli principle, that makes an airplane go up in the air. So that's pretty neat. And that drawing together and coming apart happens so fast. It happens hundreds of times per second, and it will happen faster as the pitches go up and slower as the pitches go down. But this is happening so fast and you cannot feel it happening. So that's the actual anatomical truth, but a lot of times what we feel and we believe to be closing and opening of the vocal cords themselves is in fact just closing the surrounding muscles or squeezing the muscles in the throat around the glottis. So now we get to the part where I want you to do something imaginary and false. I want you to think about what happens, this part is actually true, when you inhale, the vocal cords open totally wide. So if they were held together as you inhaled, you would get this horrible like reanimating corpse sound. Okay, so that's why when we inhale, we hold them open, and that gives us that quiet inhalation. So imagine that it's actually happening, that's true. What I want you to now imagine though is starting a sound, and here we're talking about starting a sound on a vowel with the cords open. So when I'm practicing this, I do my fingers like this. It just helps my brain to understand and send the correct messages to my muscles. So I'm going to inhale, and then I'm gonna start without closing the vocal cords. I'm actually just not closing the muscles of the throat, but here we go. So I'm gonna inhale. That is an onset that is created by balanced airflow and then the natural vibration of the cords. I'm not holding them closed, kind of squeezing in the throat. So give that a try. Let's inhale, open the cords. And I am telling you that like just holding the fingers in that V position makes a huge difference for me. I do have a couple of other exercises to help with onset. I have one called the hand sweep that's very helpful, so I will put a card for that up here. I'll try to remember to link it down in the description box below. For now, let's move to the second situation in which this closure in the throat that creates those crackles and sneering, skidding sounds, that is likely to happen when we are pronouncing consonants. Now, interestingly, consonants are in fact caused by a closure, but the closure that is creating that crackling is farther back and farther down in the throat than the closures that are required to make all of the major consonants. So when we make a sound like we are closing in the lips. B, t, p, k. All of those are created like here and forward. And when we're talking about that sound, that is coming all the way down in the throat. Now, unfortunately, what a lot of us do, and I am sure that there will be some of you who will watch this video and realize you are doing this. When you make a consonant, you may be also creating what I call a double closure. So here, with this double closure, maybe you're making the restriction or closure of the vocal shape that makes the consonant. Let's take L, for example. Tip of the tongue is up behind the top teeth against the palate. And that is creating like a shift in the shape of the mouth and the way the air flows, which makes that L consonant. What many of us do, unfortunately, is that we not only push the tongue here, but we also close in the back of the throat, like this. So, love, fly. This is really, really common. Now, those are very exaggerated, but it is super, super common to have a little break or crack in the sound when you sing something like, I wanna fly. Did you hear that little, It's because I did not only create a closure here on the L, but also here. So the consonants on which I hear this happening most frequently are and L, R, and M. These are all consonants that are voiced, so you do want to keep the voice vibrating and you want to keep the air flowing. So in order to work on this, this is very, very, very basic, but I would recommend that you sing the syllables Rama Lama. Something like Rama Lama, Rama Lama, Ra. And check what's happening. Are you getting Rama Lama, Rama Lama? Now that's very extreme, but you might find that perhaps just one of them, Rama Lama, Rama Lama, something like that may be happening. And it may be so quick. But once you catch yourself doing it, you will never stop noticing it. And I am telling you, it is incredible how fatiguing that is, compounded over the length of a song or a full rehearsal. This is actually the third or fourth time I've recorded this video because I've had a lot of trouble with the sound on my phone for some reason. And I can tell you that I'm having to start over on a new day because I got so fatigued just from demonstrating this phenomenon a few times that I felt like it was not healthy for me to continue singing. So watch out for consonants creating a double closure in the throat and then isolate to the front. Maybe you'll catch yourself doing it on other consonants as well, but just be on the lookout and then practice isolating only the forward movement to create the consonant closure and keeping the throat, the airway open. One last note about those consonant closures is they may not happen all the time, but especially when paired with a big jump upward, like in that little lick from Ricky Ian Gordon's Horse with Wings that I demonstrated. I wanna fly. Because I'm making a big leap upward, that might be a time when I'm a little more tense anyway. So I really wanna watch out for that. And if you feel like you're having trouble connecting to those high notes, take a look at the consonants and make sure that they are only happening in the front of the mouth. The third place I want you to look for closures, and this will just be the analog to onsets, is when you're cutting off a note. Do you know how to cut off a note without either closing your mouth or stopping it in the throat? If you're getting a little rough sound at the end of a cutoff, you may be cutting it off by just closing the glottis. And what you can do instead is just stop the airflow. So I don't mean stop the airflow by plugging it, I mean by just not sending any more. The final situation in which you might catch yourself having these little closures in the throat is on long final notes. So this is related to the ends of phrases, but it might happen during the final note, not just at its conclusion. This is especially likely to happen on decrescendos. So something like So if you're getting those irregularities, what is most likely happening is some kind of combination of you're slowing down the air, you're trying to make the sound smaller by squeezing it closed in the throat, and so then we get those little bald spots in the resonance. So what I would recommend for this, you can either just try and hold this open, or you can use my favorite physical kind of coordination for helping you with decrescendo. That is to monitor the action of the side ribs as you decrescendo. When you inhale, the ribs will swing up and out to the side. And then what I want you to do, and listen carefully here, is as you sing that decrescendo, sing, hear the sound becoming softer in the room, make the decrescendo, but insist that the ribs keep moving. This is very different than what is often taught. So if this is the opposite of what you know, give it a try. It's fine if you don't like it, but rather than preventing the ribs from moving and trying to hold them out as you decrescendo, I would ask you to try, inhale, really let them swing out, and then make sure that they keep moving as you make the sound quieter. And this will probably steady your airflow and allow you to make that decrescendo down to a very small dynamic without those little interruptions in the airflow that then lead to closure in the throat and those crackling sounds. So I hope that this was helpful for you. Maybe some of you caught yourself closing your throat. It's okay. I hope you have a solution now. I really want to thank you for spending time with me. I am just so grateful, not only for your time and your enthusiasm, but also for the kindness that you all show in the comments. I know that many YouTube creators really field a lot of negativity, and that has just not been my experience. You've all been so warm and generous with your knowledge and your support of one another. So thank you so much. Keep up the good work with your singing. If this was helpful to you, please do give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to hear from me in your email. I send out a newsletter almost every Friday, and there's a link to get on that list down in the description box. So thank you, keep up the good work, and in the meanwhile, thank you for practicing.